In the United States, there is one place that is more important for the KGB than even the embassy or its consulates.
How important is the United Nations to the Soviets in terms of espionage?
It's a nest of spies.
The KGB operations in the UN are controlled by the first department of the first chief directorate of the KGB. This department directs all operations against the United States and Canada. The officers of the department operate from the embassies and consulates. Operations are also run from the UN itself, where over 500 Soviets work. The UN was formed to provide a forum for dialogue between the nations of the world. Each country sends its ambassadors and their staffs to the debates which occur in the General Assembly and Security Council. Awarded diplomatic status, their representatives live in the equivalent of embassies in New York City and are expected to represent their country's interests. But in the Secretariat building are the international civil servants without diplomatic status. They are expected to be rigorously non-partisan in their administration of the UN's various departments and worldwide programs. In 1978, one of the most important Soviet defections to the West occurred. Arkady Shevchenko, who was the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, stunned his Soviet colleagues. As the highest-ranking Soviet in the UN Secretariat, Shevchenko had knowledge of extensive Soviet espionage activities in the United States. So serious was the defection that two of the Soviet Union's highest-ranking ambassadors, Dobrynin and Trianovsky, demanded a meeting with Shevchenko and his U.S. lawyer. This is the first broadcast of a tape recorded at that meeting. Ambassador Dobrynin reveals that Shevchenko was privy to Soviet state secrets, even though he was supposedly an impartial UN civil servant.
That he read top-secret documents in his mission. Up till the last day when he left, it showed that there was no surveillance.
He gave me copies of this letter. He refers to what he read, a betrayal of the ideals of the October Revolution, which is taking place now in the USSR, the monstrous abuses carried on by the KGB, compel me to take the decision to renounce my membership in the CPSU, etc.
That naturally leads one to think that he's in some abnormal state, because a normal person or one acting at his free will cannot make these explanations.
There was no need for him to stay in the Foreign Service for 30 years or 20 years, and then finally find out that he disagrees with the fruits of the October Revolution.
The United Nations Secretariat gives so many advantages for the KGB to penetrate actually almost all aspects of the American life, because they, unlike diplomats, go and travel across the country freely. They even should not, under no obligation, to notify the State Department or American mission about their travel trips or participation anywhere.
Probably the most active intelligence gathering functions are carried out by Soviets assigned to the United Nations. I say that for a number of reasons, primarily that UN employees also have total freedom of movement throughout the United States.
It's a golden mine for the Soviet Union. It's so easy to have such a huge number of the people involved in intelligence activity. My estimate would be that the people who are working for the Soviet intelligence in general in New York, about 300 or 350 persons engaged in all these activities.
In theory, the employees are there to carry out the ideals and humanitarian causes of the United Nations and run the bureaucratic machinery. But Shevchenko quickly discovered that even though he was one of the United Nations' highest-ranking bureaucrats and the head of his department, the orders came from the KGB.
I had in my department 13 Soviets, and at least 7 of them were professional KGB officers, because they didn't do anything. They didn't work in my department. They didn't receive orders from me as the head of the department. They received the orders from their bosses in the mission, from the KGB resident.
This man was one of those Soviets working for Shevchenko. His name is Valdek Enger. He was placed in Shevchenko's department not by the normal UN hiring practices, but by the KGB resident or senior officer in New York City who requested Shevchenko's help in placing the spy in the United Nations.
I agreed with that, but I think it was a mistake because it was very difficult to get rid of him later. Because he transformed my office into a kind of a center of gathering all these KGB guys and collecting all these materials and all these things. And he didn't do anything at all. Whenever I asked him to do something for the department or for the secretariat or to write something for me, he was always reluctant or absent. Or have this bunch of his KGB guys in my office. I was absolutely, I was mad about this situation.
Here, Enger is asking a U.S. naval commander to pass on secret documents.
Yes, Tim? Oh, yes. Okay. Fine, thanks. Do you have the stuff? Yes, I do. You do? Okay, Ed. Now, you know what? Proceed now to the south. And just after the Essex Toll Plaza,
Yeah?
you'll see the phone booth, public phone booth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the second phone booth from the right, if you look at in front of you, you know, after the booth. Just under the shelf, you'll see the small box, okay?
Okay.
And follow the instructions completely, and you'll find everything there, all right?
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I'll talk to you later.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The head of the KGB operating out of the Soviet mission to the United Nations has been identified by Shevchenko as V. Kazakov. Within the UN, the Soviets are also able to exert influence. Viktor Lesyovsky is a KGB officer who occupies the post of Special Assistant to the Secretary General in the United Nations. He chooses the speakers for the debates in the General Assembly. Vasily Solodonnikov is another KGB officer who served as a senior secretariat official. A man who served with Solodonnikov at the International Relations Institute in Moscow was Igor Glagolev, who was an advisor to the Politburo before he defected to the West.
Yes, they were high-ranking members of the KGB. They were not, people who were used by the KGB, because KGB can use, many people without their knowledge. But they were just regular agents of the KGB. And the trouble is that they control the staff of the United Nations permanently, always.
Solodonnikov was an advisor to Joshua Nkomo and other rebel leaders during the war in Zimbabwe-Rhodesia. He is now a key formulator of Soviet policy in Africa and is their ambassador to Zambia.
Later on, he was assistant to the Secretary General, and later on he was director of the Institute of Africa. And now he's the Soviet ambassador in Zambia, where he masterminded the takeover of Zimbabwe, and now he's organizing the takeover of South Africa.